Greetings to all viewers. I am Dr. Bhagilakshmi, working as Assistant Professor in the Department of Management Studies. It's my pleasure to deliver a video lecture on capital structure theories, presenting an overview on capital structure meaning, second process and the sources of fund, fourth net income theory and fifth net operating income theory. Basically, capital structure theory is to set forth a financial decision, a framework for the financial decision. In practice, all the business people, when they take an investment decision, simultaneously they used to take the financial decision also. Let me explain this with a good example. Let us consider a person, John. He has decided to start a new company and he needs $2,000 to invest in his company. Now he went to his savings account and checked and found that he has only $1,000 in his account. Now what does he do for the remaining investment? So he went and approached one of his friends. His friend was a smart guy. He guides him to go to the bank and ask for help. John likes his idea and John went to the bank to ask for help. He explained his situation to the banker. Banker was ready to avail him a loan. Banker said they are willing to give a loan for $1,000 but with the extra charges of 10% as interest. And also he has to give his gold watch as a security for the loan. John agrees for the banker's offer and he gave the watch as a security and took the $1,000 with him. Now he has $2,000 in his hand. After investing $2,000, his business went well for a few days. After a few days, he could found that his business is not moving quite well. So he need an additional investment. He need more money to be invested, say $1,000. So banker, and also he was not sure that whether the company will yield a profit or loss. And he also was not sure that whether he will able to pay the bank balance to the entire interest amount and the amount which he has issued from the bank to the bankers. So the bank option is a no more option to him to borrow the money. So he again went to his friend and asked for a help. His friend said that better you borrow from the public. So again he got the idea. He went to the public. He approached those persons whom he knows, as much as persons he knows, and he explained his business idea. All those persons who are interested in investing in the company, they are willing to invest in his company. And through this, he collected $1,000 as $100 from 10 different persons. So 10 different persons gave him $100. So through that totally $1,000 he has collected and he invested in the business. Now the total money invested in the business is 2,000 plus 1,000, 3,000. This investment money which is there in the business is what we call it as capital. And the money which he has borrowed from the bankers, we mean it as debt. And the money which he has invested out of his own money, savings, that is his own fund. And the money which he has borrowed from the public, we call it as equity. As such, assets of a company, if you take any company like John's company, it can be invested by two means. One is debt and another one is equity, which is otherwise called as owner's claim and creditor's claim. So it is clear that we must understand very clearly the various sources of finance. So John's sources of finance is bank, his own fund, and from the public. So like this, different sources of finance is there. The various means of financing the company is what we call it as capital structure of a company. It can be defined as the proportionate relationship between debt and equity, which will be directly affecting the returns of the company. So as defined by I.M. Pandey, the proportionate relationship between debt and equity will have some influence on the returns to the shareholders and the value of the firm, which we study is what we call as capital structure theories. So what is the relationship between the debt and equity? What is the proportion of debt in the firm's entire capital, and what is the proportion of equity in the firm's entire capital? This is what we call it as capital structure of a company. And say for example, at the end of the first year, take the same example, at the end of the first year, John has incurred $500 as profit. So he has yielded 500 as profit. So totally his cash inflow is 3,500. They invested money 3,000 plus 500. So 3,500 is the cash inflow. So 500 profit must be distributed among all the sources of finance. Out of this 500, 10% he will be paying as interest, that is the fixed charges of return to the bankers. So $100 he will be distributing to bankers, and to the public he has promised that he will be sharing the profit equally. It means profit goes in either way, that is if there is a profit they will distribute the profit in equal way. If there is a loss they will be bearing the loss equally. So now there is a profit, so they have to distribute it equally as per their shares in the company. So he has invested $1,000, he receives 200 as profit, and to the public he will share another 200. So totally 200 plus 200 plus 100, they will share the 500 at this proportionate. So what will happen is, when there is a debt which is there in the company, automatically the returns which is paid to the equity shareholders, that is owners claim, will be less. Always the debt will be ranked first in distributing the net profit. So 500, first you have to pay only the bankers, first preference will be given to the bankers. So out of the 500, first preference only for the bankers. So therefore always outside creditors, if it is there in the business, so they will be the ranked first to claim the amount, and next only the equity shareholders will receive some benefit. Therefore the mix of debt and equity in the capital will have some effect on the returns which is paid to the shareholders. This is what we call as the process of capital structure, which we shall see next. The process of capital structure starts with capital budgeting decision, which means investment decision taken by the firm. Capital budgeting involves investing in long-term assets. So there may be different projects available to the business, or the firms may decide to invest in new project. So whenever you're decided to invest in a long-term asset, it means a capital budgeting decision which you are taking, and it may be of different categories, choosing the best alternative project, and then you will go for sometimes replacement or renovation of your own firm, and sometimes modernization will take place, expansion, diversification, all these are coming under capital budgeting decision. All these are some of the examples of capital budgeting decision. So once if you decided to invest in all these categories, automatically you need some money. You need to raise some money to invest in expansion or in new project or modernization. And the fund which you are going to raise, it may be of two categories. One is debt, another one is equity. Whatever may be the asset, whether if you decide to purchase a machine or whatever it may be the asset, simultaneously you are involving to invest in your own fund or to borrow the funds from the outsiders. So therefore, debt and equity will play an important role to raise the fund. So when you decide upon raising the fund, you will have so much of questions in your mind. Should we employ only debt or equity or both? And another question, what are the implications of the debt and equity on the shareholders' return? And next you may have another question in your mind as to what will be the appropriate mix. So whether 60:40 will be appropriate or 80:20 will be appropriate. So what will be the appropriate mix to maximize the shareholders' wealth? So like this, so much of questions will be there in your mind. Answering all these questions only we call it as capital structuring decision, which was taken by the financial manager. And this decision will be taken by considering the already existing capital structure of the firm, if it is an already existing firm, and the dividend ratio of the firm, or we say the dividend decision of the firm. Dividend decision means out of the net profit, sometimes all the firms will not distribute the whole residual income to the equity shareholders. After paying for the outsiders, the remaining income sometimes they will retain a certain proportion for future operation. So for example, out of your net profit, sometimes they will distribute only 60% as dividend to the equity shareholders, and remaining 40% they will retain. That is what we call as retention ratio, and the 60% we mean as payout ratio. So sometimes this decision will also have some effect on the capital structuring. Suppose if a firm has a desire to distribute only 60%, you need to have some clarification as to what should be the mix of debt and equity. So therefore, this should also have some effect. This will also have some effect on the capital structuring decision. Now, after considering these two, you will decide what should be the mix of debt and equity in your capital. And this decision which you have taken will have some effect on return and risk of your firm. Return and risk of your shareholders especially. It is like a the two edges of a sword. That is, sometimes it will earn high return to the equity shareholders, sometimes it will create some risk to the shareholders. So both return and risk is involved in the capital structuring decision, and this in turn will have some effect on the cost of capital. That is the overall cost of capital. So when you are raising the funds through the debt and equity, you need to pay some returns. So as John did, he has paid $100 to the banker, and remaining $400 distributed for the equities. So like this, you may have some expense there. So you need to have some cost of involving that kind of capital in your business. So that overall cost of capital will also be affected by this particular decision, and this in turn finally will affect the value of the firm. So once if you are able to manage the cost, automatically all these decisions lead to maximization or minimization of the value of the firm. So therefore, the optimum capital structure is a level at which you are able to minimize your cost and maximize your value. So you need to have a balance between these two. So with the given return and risk, you need to minimize your cost and you need to maximize the value of the firm. So when you are able to do this, that level only we call it as optimum capital structure of a firm. So hope you all have understood what is the process of capital structuring decision. And now let us have a clear idea about what are the sources of finance. There are different sources of finance. As mentioned earlier, whatever means you're investing, whatever means of financing is there in the business, it can be classified into, for exposition, it can be classified into two categories. One is those which has fixed charges, and another one is those which do not have a fixed charges. So those who do have a fixed charges is what we call as debt, and those do not have a fixed charges or cost is what we call as equity. The first thing which we have, which is there in the sources of finance, is which we have to discuss is debentures. So we need to clearly understand what are debentures there. Debenture is a long-term security or investment through which the firms will raise the fund. So this is otherwise called as bond if it is issued by the government company. And the main features of the debentures are, first, it has a face value. Face value is otherwise called as the par value upon which the interest will be calculated. And second, it will have a fixed interest rate. Fixed interest rate in a sense, so what it will be a fixed one, and it will be a coupon rate which will be a certified interest to be paid on the face value. And third is, it will have a redemption value. Redemption value in the sense, it will have a maturity period. So upon maturity, we need to pay the entire money back to the debenture holders. So if it is having a maturity period of 5 years, so you have to invest only for 5 years. At the end of the 5th year, they will repay the entire money. The value which has been paid to the debenture holders at the end of the maturity period is what we call as redemption value. And surely it will have a maturity period. It may be 5 years or it may be 6 years. It depends upon the decision taken by the firm. And fifth, it will have a market value. Market value is the value which will be determined by the stock exchange. So when this debenture is traded on the stock exchange, if the what is the value that they are able to purchase the debenture is what we call as market value. It may be differing from face value and as well as redemption value. So market value will be determined in the stock exchange. The value for which it is being sold in the stock exchange. So these are the main features of a bond. And next comes the preference share. Preference share is also another source of financing the firm. So this is also a long-term sources of finance, and it is a unique sources of finance because it is a hybrid way of raising the fund. That is, it has both the features of a debenture and as well as the equity. So as like debenture, it will also have a face value. As like the debenture, it will have a fixed dividend. So debenture you used to pay fixed interest, whereas for preference fund you will pay a fixed dividend. So the rate will be fixed at the time of issuing the preference share itself. And third, it will also have a maturity period as like the debenture. And fourth, it will also redeemability will be there for the preference share also. So redeemability means it will able to wind up the shares and convert it into equity shares, or after maturity it can be paid back to the preference shareholders. And fifth, it will have so far as some futures which is there for equity shareholders. So like say for example, it has the voting rights. Sometimes preference shares, if it is not paid properly, that is continuously, consecutively for 2 years, if they are not able to pay the returns, the fixed dividend to the preference shareholders, automatically they will have the voting rights. Voting rights in the sense they will have the rights to vote for all the board of directors, and they will have the rights to resolve all the meetings which is there carried down by the board of directors. And sixth, it will have the rights to claim. On assets. Right to claim on asset always. Why the name preference share has the name preference means because they will have the first preference to claim against the assets of the company when compared to equity shareholders. So they will rank first to pay the returns before the equity shareholders. That is what the rights to claim the claim on assets. And next is the equity shares. Equity shares, the first right is residual income. The first feature of an equity share is residual income. It means for out of your net profit, first you will make the payment of fixed interest, because debenture will be always considered as a debt. So for outsiders you need to pay the first, you need to pay the returns first. So outsiders claims will be given the first preference. So fixed interest, after fixed interest, preference share has the right to claim on the asset than the equity shareholders. So therefore you have to pay the returns to preference shareholders, and the remaining net profit which is available as residual income is what distributed as dividend to equity shareholders. Only the remaining profit will be available to equity shareholders. Therefore we call it as a riskiest investment, and equity shareholders, once if they invest in the company, they will become one of the owners of the company because of the risk which they are taking in the business. And second is they have the right to claim on assets. So next to preference shares, so equity shareholders has the right to claim on the assets. Suppose upon liquidations, if the value of the asset is not insufficient, is not available, or it is insufficient to distribute for equity shareholders, it will be remaining unpaid. But it is not the case for preference share. So upon liquidations, if also they need to pay the entire amount to the preference fund. So this is what the second feature of equity shares. And third is they have the right to vote. Right to vote in the sense they will have the right to vote for all the meetings and for all the resolutions passed in the boards of directors meeting, and they have other rights to elect the directors also. So additional right to equity shareholders, since they are also considered as owners, they will have the right to elect the directors who should participate in the board meetings and other things. So this is what the main features of equity shareholders. So these are the three main sources there, and out of these, debenture and preference will be considered as debt, and equity will be considered as equity. That is, these are outsiders claim and this is owners claim. So these are the main sources of long-term finance. And traditionally we won't consider the short-term sources of finance like bills payable, creditors, short-term loans like less than 3 years. All these are not considered for capital structuring. That is, it will not form a part of the capital expenditure. Only the long-term sources we consider it as capital structure of a business. Then next, these sources of finance, whatever you are investing, so whether you are raising the fund through preference or equity or debenture, it will have some effect, it will surely influence the earnings per share, that is the returns which you are paying for the shareholders, and that only we call it as financial leverage of a company. Now let us see what is financial leverage of a company. So the effect of debt and equity in the capital structure is what we call as the effect of debt and equity upon paying the returns to the shareholders. The earnings per share is what we call as a leverage. Obviously, leverage, it can be clearly said that leverage is the employment of fixed charges or fixed cost in the capital of the company. So when you are employing debt, it is what we call as a leverage. Suppose if a company is there, if a firm is there, if that firm employs both debt and equity, we mean it as it is a levered firm. It is a levered firm. Suppose if a firm is there, if it employs the entire fund only by means of equity, we mean it as unlevered firm. So the employment of fixed charges, only for the debt you will be paying fixed charges. So for equity it is not a fixed charges. So whenever you are employing a fixed charges of or fixed sources of fund, automatically it means we call it as a leverage, and in another term we call it as a financial leverage of the company. And this financial leverage will have some effect on the earnings per share. That is, with the given changes in the EBIT, the income which has been generated by the firm, it will also have some changes in the earnings which you are distributing for the equity. So therefore, a financial manager must have the ability to use the financial leverage in such a way that it is going to have a greater return for the equity shareholders. So now let us see that with an example. Say for example, Brightways is a company which has a 24% of return on total investment of say for example 5 lakhs, and they have the management of the firm has decided to invest this 5 lakhs. They are expecting a 24% return on a total investment of 5 lakhs. Now the manager has to decide some financial plan to raise this 5 lakh rupees. So first plan 1, they decided to invest the ordinary share. They decided to issue ordinary share of 50,000. Ordinary share is otherwise called as equity shares, with a face value of rupees 10 per share. And the second plan, let us consider that they are going to collect 2,50,000 by issuing 25,000 ordinary share with a face value of rupees 10 per share. And another 2,50,000 is being borrowed at a rate of 15%. Borrowed fund to the extent of 2,50,000. So this is what they have planned. So they have two decisions, plan 1, plan 2. Plan 1 is a levered decision, unlevered decision. Plan 2 is a levered decision, because in the plan 1 they have decided to raise the entire 5 lakhs by issuing 50,000 shares with a face value of 10 per share, whereas in plan 2 they have decided to raise 2,50,000 through ordinary share and another 2,50,000 to be borrowed at a rate of 15%. So borrowing at a rate of 15%, fixed charges means automatically you are involving a debt in the financial structure. So once if you employ debt, there is a financial leverage there, and this will have some effect on the earnings per share. Now let us see how it is going to affect the earnings per share of a company. Plan 1. Plan 1 is an entirely equity finance. Plan 2 is a combination of debt and equity. Now to see the effect on EPS, first you have to consider the earnings before interest and tax, which is otherwise called as net operating income of the firm. That is the returns earned from the investment. So they are expecting 24% out of 5 lakh rupees. So you need to calculate 24% on 5 lakhs to derive the EBIT. So it may amount to 1,20,000. And from the EBIT, as I said already, you need to pay the interest first. Always outsiders clients will be given the first preference. So therefore, you need to pay the interest. In the first plan, you don't have interest at all because entire amount has been raised only through the issue of ordinary shares. So there is no interest in the first plan, whereas in the second plan, you have employed a borrowed fund at the rate of 15%. So you have to pay interest of 15% on 2,50,000. Therefore, it amounts to 37,500. And after deducting this, you will have profit after interest but before tax. And next, you have to deduct the tax. Let us consider the tax rate as 50%. For example, suppose if you are paying a tax at 50%, you need to pay 60,000 as tax in the first plan, and in the second plan you need to pay 41,250 as tax. So remaining 41,250 rupees will be available to equity shareholders. That is profit after tax earnings which is available to equity shareholders. And to distribute this earnings which is available to equity shareholders after paying the interest and tax, you need to know the number of equity shares which is employed in the business. In the first plan, you have employed 50,000 shares. So therefore, you need to consider 50,000 here. In the second plan, you have employed only 25,000 shares at a face value of 10 per share. So in the second plan, you have employed only 25,000 shares. Now, if you distribute this earnings which is available for equity shareholders to the entire shares which is available, you will get earnings per share, EPS. For one share, you will be getting 1.20 in the first plan, and you will be getting 1.65 in the second plan. Now see the difference. In the first plan, where it is a unlevered, you have received 1.20 as the answer, and in the second plan you have an increased amount of 1.65. So why there is a difference here? So the reason behind here is when you are employing debt, the first reason is when you are employing debt, what will happen is as much as debt if you employ, you are reducing the total number of shares which you are distributing as total number of shares which you are investing in your firm, and the rate of interest which you have paid to the borrowed fund, that is 15%. So you have employed 15% as the 15% cost of fund to earn a return of 24%. So now what is the difference here? The difference here is 9%. So 15% cost you have spent to earn a 24% return, and you have got 9% as income, and this 9% will be again distributed to the equity shareholders only. So therefore, there is a 37.5% difference between the levered plan, unlevered plan and the unlevered plan. When there is only equity, you are just investing only the equity fund and you are distributing the returns to the entire equity shareholders. So you will not able to save anything. But when there is a leverage in the firm, that is when you are employing debt in the firm, automatically what happens is your earnings per share will be increasing, because the total number of equity shares will be decreasing, and you will able to have a less cost which is paid to the debt and raise the returns which you are going to distribute to the equity shareholders. So this is what the effect of leverage in the earnings per share of a company. So therefore, now I think you might have understood very clearly that capital structure decision, which is otherwise called as financial leverage decision, will have a direct effect, that is it influences the returns to the equity shareholders. So if you say that you don't employ the debt, you will get only 1.20. If you employ the debt, you will get 1.65, that is a 0.45 more than the unlevered decision. So therefore, taking an appropriate mix decision to appropriate mix of debt and equity is a very vital decision taken by the financial manager. And also this is an effect on EPS. This EPS will again in turn affect the value of the firm as a whole. So when you study the effect of the capital structure on the value of the firm, that is the entire shareholders wealth, so maximizing of shareholders wealth, we mean it as the capital structure theories. And there are different viewpoints as to the theories of capital structure. So different conversations are there and different viewpoints are there, and one such theory is net income theory, another one theory is net operating income theory, and these two theories will be varying from each other. Now let us see what is net income theory and net operating theories of capital structure. People argue in different way. There are difference of opinion as to the effect of capital structure on the value of the firm. So studying the impact of capital structure on the value of the firm is what we call as capital structure theories. And there are two different theories. One is net income theory. And the other theory is net operating income. Net income theory and net operating income theory both are suggested by Durant, a financialist named as Durant. As per net income theory, they say that capital structure is directly related to the value of the firm. Therefore, it is called as a irrelevant theory. Net operating income theory is also suggested by same person Durant, but it is diametrically opposite to net income theory. That is, he argues that net income capital structure is irrelevant to the value of the firm. Therefore, it is an irrelevant theory. So two theories are there. One is relevant, another one is argued as irrelevant. Now let us see what they consider as relevant. So as per the net income theory, Durant says that when you are increasing the financial leverage, as we discussed earlier, if you employ more and more of a debt in a capital structure of your business, automatically the overall cost of capital will be decreasing and your value of the firm will be increasing. And when you are decreasing consecutively, when you are decreasing the employment of debt in your capital structure, automatically the cost, the overall cost of capital will be increasing and the value of the firm will be decreasing. So this is what he has suggested with an assumption, sir. First assumption, with an assumption of first, there is no taxes. So he assumed that there is no taxes charged in the financial structure of the company. So whatever income they have generated, there is no tax will be paid and it will be included later. And second, he assumed that there is a constant risk perception in the minds of the investors. That is, whether they employ debt or equity, the investors are not going to change their mindset. So whatever may be the capital structure, they will be coming forward to invest in their companies. So that is what the second assumption which he had. And the third assumption is the cost of debt will be always less than the cost of equity. So to say that when you are increasing the leverage, that is when you are increasing the debt in the mix of your capital structure, the value of the firm must be increasing, means you need to raise the fund, the debt fund, at a lesser cost than the equity. So whatever cost you have spent to the equity shareholders, it will be less than the cost which you are spending to the debt. So these are the assumptions which he has made in framing this particular theory. And he used a formula to calculate the market value of the firm. That is, yes, the market value of the equity. First he has to calculate the equity to calculate the market value of the firm. So market value of the equity, yes, is equal to NI divided by KE. That is net income, earnings available to the shareholders divided by the capitalization rate, equity capitalization rate. So what is the returns that they are going to pay for the equity shareholders? So earnings available divided by the earnings equity capitalization rate will give you the total market value of the equity employed in that particular firm. And next you need to calculate the value of the firm, which is represented by V. Market value of the firm is equal to S plus B. That is, you have only two sources of finance. One is owner's claim, another one is creditor's claim. So owner's claim is what we call as equity, which is represented as S, the market value of equity, and the borrowed fund, that is the fund which you have raised to the debt, we represent by the term B. So S plus B will give you the value of the firm. So V is equal to market value of equity plus market value of the debt. So if you add that, you will get the total value of the firm. Next, you will calculate the K naught, that is overall cost of capital, using the formula KD is equal to KD into B by V plus K suffix E into S divided by V. So you have to calculate the overall cost of capital by dividing the market value of bond by the value of the firm into the return cost of debt, and then plus the market value of equity divided by market value of the firm into the cost of equity. Next is the net operating income. So net operating income theory suggests that the capital structure of the theory, capital structure of the firm is no way relevant to the market value of the firm. So how he has suggested this is by considering the certain assumptions. The first assumption here is he considered that there is constant K naught, that is constant cost of capital. So whatever may be the mix of debt and equity, your cost of capital, the overall cost of capital will be remaining constant. So how it is possible means he just says that only the equity capitalization rate, the returns which you are going to pay for the equity capital, that is varying KE. The returns which you are going to pay for the equity shareholders will only vary, but the debt amount which you have raised will not be varying. So this is what he has suggested in the second assumption. Third assumption he has made is always there is no taxes charged on the thing. So there will be a constant K naught and there will be a varying KE. Varying KE in the sense the dividend paid to the equity shareholders will be varying, and there will not be any change in the value of the firm. So whereas in net income theory they suggest that KE will be remaining constant. In net operating income he suggests that K naught will be remaining constant, but KE will be varying. So when there is a change in the KE, it will not affect the value of the firm. So whatever may be the change, so if you are increasing the financial leverage in the firm as per net operating income theory, so it will not decrease the overall cost of capital. Overall cost of capital will be remaining constant. So it will be remaining as it is, and the value of the firm will be also remaining constant. Both WACC and both value of the firm will be remaining constant, whatever changes you are making in the financial leverage. So whether you are increasing or whether you are decreasing, it will remain constant. So this is what he has argued under net operating income theory, and this can be well explained with an example. Now let us see the example for this. Let us consider an example for both net income and net operating income theory. Under net income theory, let us consider there was a return, that is there was an EBIT for a company at rupees 50,000, and they have employed debt in the capital structure. So let us consider it be 10% debenture of rupees 2 lakhs. So 2 lakhs, 10% debenture has been involved there, and the KE equity capitalization rate, the returns paid to the equity shareholders is 12.5%. So this is for a company. Next, in the now net operating income, let us consider the same example. EBIT rupees 50,000 earned by the company, and same 10% debenture at rupees 2 lakhs, and K naught will be remaining constant in net operating income theory. So therefore we shall consider K naught as 12.5% here. So in case of net income theory, KE will be constant, therefore we consider KE in the calculations. Now let us see how the financial leverage is affecting the value of the firm. First you have to consider EBIT. EBIT is 50,000 here. From the EBIT you have to deduct the interest You have to pay the interest first. So interest here is 10% debenture of rupees 2 lakhs. So on 2 lakhs you have to calculate 10%. So it may amount to 20,000. So if you deduct this, you will get 30,000 as balance. So this 30,000 is the earnings which is available to equity shareholders. So that's it. There is no taxes. The assumption in the net income theory is there is no taxes. So you don't need to deduct taxes. So net income, otherwise called as earnings available to equity shareholders, is 30,000. Next, you have to calculate the market value of the equity. That is S. S is equal to NI divided by KE. So NI here is 30,000. KE is given as 12.5%. So 30,000 divided by 12.5%. So you will get the equity value as 2,40,000. Next, you have to calculate the market value of debt, otherwise called as B. B is already given there. The value of debt is given in the question as 2 lakhs. We have considered it as 2 lakhs. So 2 lakhs is the value of debt. Now, to calculate the total value of the firm, that is V, market value of the firm V is equal to S plus B. So S is 2,40,000 and B is 2 lakh. So total value of the firm is 4,40,000. Next, we have to calculate the cost of capital, overall cost of capital K naught. K naught is equal to KD, that is the cost of debt. The cost of debt is 10%. So therefore 10% you have to consider, and the S is B divided by 2 lakhs divided by value of the firm 4.4 lakhs plus cost of equity. Cost of equity is 0.125, 12.5% into market value of the equity 2,40,000 divided by 4.4 lakhs. So if you do this, as I wrote the formula already, you will get the cost of capital, overall cost of capital of the firm. So it may be 11.36%. Now see, when you are employing a debt of 2 lakhs, your value of the firm is 4,40,000 and your K naught is 11.36%. So this is what net income theory says. So whenever you are increasing the debt, so whenever you are employing a debt, the value of the firm will be increasing and the overall cost of capital will be decreasing. So you need to calculate the value and the cost in this procedure. So when you have another example where you are increasing the debt to 3 lakh rupees, say for example from 3 lakhs to 2 lakhs, you can see the changes there, what is happening in the financial, what is happening to the value of the firm and cost of capital. So instead of 20,000 interest, if you are paying 30,000 as interest, so instead of 20, if you are paying 30,000 as interest by raising 3 lakh rupees, your bond value will also change and the value of the firm will be increasing and the overall cost of capital will be increasing. So this is why he argued that always whatever debt and equity mix you decide in your firm will have a direct effect. It is relevant to the value of the firm and cost of capital. So therefore you need to choose the appropriate, a optimum level where you are able to minimize the cost and maximize the value of the firm. So this is what net income theory. Now let us see net operating income theory. So in the net operating income theory, first you have to consider the EBIT. EBIT here is also same example, 50,000. Next you have to consider the K naught. K naught here is constant. So as per NOI, K naught will be remaining constant. There won't be any change in the cost of capital. So you have to consider the K naught. K naught is 0.125. If you divide this EBIT by K naught, you will get yes. So EBIT divided by K naught will give you the market value of the equity. So market value of the equity will be by considering K naught. If you divide EBIT by K naught, you will get the value of the firm V. Value of the firm 50,000 divided by 0.125 will be 4 lakhs. After calculating the value of the firm by the formula which is suggested under NOI, that is EBIT divided by K naught, you need to go for calculating the value of the equity. So to calculate value of equity, you should first know what is B, that is market value of the bond. Market value of the bond is 2 lakhs. So 2 lakhs if you consider, you will get the equity, market value of equity. Here the market value of equity will be calculated in a reverse way, that is S is equal to V minus B. In net income, you used to calculate V is equal to S plus B, you will derive the market value of the firm. Whereas in net operating income, they are calculating the market value of equity from the value of the firm by considering K naught as constant. So S is equal to V minus B, it amounts to 2 lakh rupees. Now next step is you need to calculate the KE. So because KE will not remain constant, so whatever may be the mix, the KE will be changing but K naught will be constant. So when you want to calculate the KE, you need to consider the EBIT minus interest, that is net income which is available to the earnings, that is equity shareholders, and you have to divide that by the the market value of the equity shareholders. So EBIT minus interest is 30,000, that is 50,000 minus interest of 10% on 2 lakhs. So you will get net EBIT minus interest 30,000. So divided by 2 lakhs, if you do, you will get the percentage as 15. That is the equity for the equity shareholders, you will pay 15% as return. And next you need to calculate the K naught as the same formula which we did for net income. So KD into the cost of debt into the market value of debt 2 lakhs divided by market value of the firm 4 lakhs plus KE, that is equity capitalization rate, cost of equity into market value of equity 2 lakhs divided by 4 lakhs. If you do this, you will get the same answer as 0.125 which we consider in the question. So in our example, we considered K naught would be remaining 12.5%. As we consider 12.5%, after you calculate the value of the firm and as well as the equity capitalization rate, the K naught will be remaining constant. So even though if you increase the debt, the mix of debt from 2 lakhs to 3 lakhs, you will get the same value, that is 4 lakhs as the answer because your EBIT is going to remain as 50,000 in the example and K naught is going to remain 12.5%. So whatever may be the increase in the debt, the value of the firm will be remaining 4 lakhs and the overall cost of capital will be remaining 0.25, but the equity shares alone will be increased. The returns which you are paying for equity shareholders KE will alone be increasing. So if you are employing 3 lakhs shares, if you are raising the debt to 3 lakhs from 2 lakhs to 3 lakhs, you will pay an interest of 30,000 and this will lead to an increase in the equity. So from 0.15 to it may be 0.16 or 17. So this is what net operating income. So our capital structure is entirely irrelevant to the value of the firm and as well as the cost of the capital. So these are the two theories which was given under capital structuring. Hope you all have understood what is the meaning of a capital structure. So debt and equity, the mix of debt and equity is what we call as capital structure of a firm, and the process how we are doing the capital structuring and the sources of funds to invest in a business, and what do you mean by leverage and how the financial leverage is affecting the earnings per share, and the two theories, the relevant and irrelevant theories of capital structuring. Thank you.